We're going to begin. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to our national and international attendees. My name is Grishma Shah, and I will be your host for the creator session of Access Reframed. I have curly brown shoulder-length hair and am Indian American. My pronouns are she, her. I'm a filmmaker and film festival director. On behalf of Full Spectrum, Backbones, All Senses Go, and La Grish, I would like to thank you for joining us today. In partnership, the American Indian Center and Full Spectrum Features have crafted the following land acknowledgement to bring more awareness to the history of Indigenous peoples and their territories, and to help us all rethink our relationships with the city, the land, and the environment. This land acknowledgement is specific to our city and geographical area, as the Access Reframed Planning Team and American Indian Center are all based in Chicago. Chicago is the traditional homelands of the Council of the Three Fires, the Odawa, Ojibwe, and Potawatomi nations. Many other tribes like the Miami, Ho-Chunk, Menominee, Sac, and Fox also called this area home. Located at the intersection of several great waterways, the land naturally became a site of travel and healing for many tribes. American Indians continue to call this area home, and now Chicago is home to the sixth largest urban American Indian community that still practices their heritage, traditions, and care for the land and waterways. Today, despite the many changes the city has experienced, Chicago continues to be a place that calls many people from diverse backgrounds and perspectives to live and gather here. Here's one concrete action that you can take today to support Native American narratives. Get involved with community advocacy and local campaigns to recognize the second Monday in October, this upcoming Monday, as Indigenous Peoples Day. We'll drop the link for advocacy specific to Chicago in the chat box. Continuing in the spirit of diversity, equity, and inclusion, let me now turn back to film. Did you know, starting 2024, films wanting to qualify for an Oscar in the Best Picture category will need to meet on-screen and off-screen inclusion standards? Enter Access Reframed, a series of conversations that were the result of a group of us discussing the importance of making all aspects of society truly accessible, and how often disability is forgotten when addressing diversity and inclusion. The reality is, aesthetics accessibility is too often approached as an afterthought, with only compliance in mind. Ask any creative what they want from their film, and they'll likely say one of two things: film exposure or return on investment. We at Access Reframed believe both of these things are not possible unless access and equity are implemented at every stage of a film's journey. We get it. From cost barriers to seemingly complex technologies, creators, presenters, and funders find themselves in a constant conversation about who is responsible for meeting access needs like captioning, ASL interpretation, audio description, and more. That's why we're here today, to approach the challenge from a place of collaboration, to reframe accessibility as a societal value that's also great for business. We challenge you to think about why accessibility is essential to the life of your film and how it can expand and impact your audiences. We will also hear what talented filmmakers' experiences have been in the film industry and what they would like to see in terms of opportunity, inclusion, and representation. In the spirit of collaboration, this program is made possible by a grant from Illinois Humanities and our sponsors, Chicago Public Library and Chicago Cultural Accessibility Consortium. Lastly, we do have some housekeeping tips for our attendees. To ensure notifications are at a minimum for low vision or blind attendees using screen readers, please only use the chat option if you're having tech difficulties. If you have a question for the panelists, please type them in the Q&A box below. I will read your questions when it's time to do so. We recommend you joining from a computer rather than a mobile device for easier view of ASL interpreters. Finally, this 90-minute session is being recorded, and a link to this recording and transcript will be shared with you at a later date. Now, I'd like to start our session and introduce the moderator for today, Day Al Mohammed. Day is an author, filmmaker, founding member of Forward Doc, and is a disability policy strategist with over 15 years of experience. Day, welcome. I pass the baton to you to introduce our wonderful panelists.
Thanks so much, Grishma. I am super excited to be here, and I hope you guys out there listening and watching are excited to be a part of Access Reframed. So welcome to our first creator conversation. And oh my gosh, I hope you guys are excited as I am, because we have three amazing filmmakers that I can't wait to introduce you to. So the first is Reed Davenport, and he is a documentary filmmaker whose work focuses on disability from a political perspective. And he's just talented. He's been doing a lot of this for years and has some great work out there. Jade Bryan is an acclaimed Black deaf filmmaker and founder of the Deaf Talent Movement. And her recent work includes the feature film, The Shattered Mind, and it's the first ever film about a Black deaf family. And third, we have Rodney Evans, who's a writer, director, and producer. And his latest feature film, Vision Portraits, world premiered at the 2019 South by Southwest Film Festival and earned the 2019 Jury Award for Outstanding Documentary at Frameline, the San Francisco LGBT plus film festival. So welcome, folks. So excited to have you all here.
Thanks.
Great to be here. Thank you, Doug.
All right. So, there's so much to cover when we start talking about access and disability in film. And so we're going to try and get this in our 90 minutes allotted, but you know what? We know we're not going to get it all. So I guess the first thing is a little about the importance of accessible screenings and accessible events themselves. And I'm just kind of curious about you guys as filmmakers, kind of what you have seen and experienced as a part of that, and maybe what you would like to see. Any volunteers?
I can start.
Absolutely.
You know, as someone who just made a feature film that chronicles 4 blind and low vision artists, you know, I would say that, you know, I knew from the inception of the film that the audio description was going to be key to getting the film to blind and low vision communities. So, you know, I made that part of my post-sound process and collaborated with an audio describer named Erin Ward, and she, you know, wrote an audio description, and we kind of moved back and forth in terms of the phrasing and the words, and I was there when she recorded it, and you know, giving her notes. We were, you know, rewriting up until she was, you know, recording. So it was a true collaboration between her, myself, and the sound editor. Tom Effinger. And I would say that that's not normal in terms of industry practice. I think that a film is usually done, edited, and then captioning and audio description is usually left for a distributor who sends it out to a company. The filmmaker is not involved with how that is done, and it just comes back completed. Whether you like the way that it's done or not, it's attached to your film and you just kind of have to live with it. But I wanted it to be part of my festival experience, you know. So I guess the sad state of affairs in the US is that most film festivals in the US could not accommodate audio description in their DCP projection. And I found that most of the international film festivals, like the Sydney Film Festival or the Toronto Inside Out Film Festival, immediately asked for that version of the film. And, you know, it was not even a question of whether or not they were going to show the film with audio description. It was just the expectation. And, you know, in the theatrical run, I partnered with a lot of blind and low vision nonprofits like the Lighthouse in San Francisco to do an open audio description for blind and low vision audience members. Other places like, I'm trying to think, yeah, the New York State Council for the Blind. So, you know, it took a lot of collaboration and partnerships to kind of build audiences, to let them know that this film was out there and about them and for them, for us really, because I'm a member of the community that I'm documenting. So that was a little bit about my experience.
So I just want to pinpoint one thing that you brought up, and I'm curious about, because I think one of the things you said is very true. Most filmmakers send out and say, go ahead and caption it, go ahead and just do the audio description, and they get it done. And you wanted to have a hands-on approach to that, because I'm going to put words in your mouth here, but you saw it as a creative part of your film, and as much a part of the experience. Can you, and I'm biased because I saw clips, I know where I was. Can you give kind of just a quick example for folks maybe who haven't seen it, kind of like what that difference made, even if it's just a sentence of the description versus way it might have been done without you participating on it, especially since a good chunk is about performance.
Right. Well, I mean, I think it brings to life the performance. I think of it as akin to poetry, really, in terms of translating visuals into language in a very succinct way. You know, you have to be careful not to step on, obviously, interview audio or observational scenes where there's other language going on, because then it gets confusing. But so there are these silent moments in the film that you have for audio description. And so an example would be, there's an African-American female dancer in my film, and visually you just see her dancing. But in the audio description, there's a very vivid and emotional and precise description of exactly what her body's movement, like her bodily movements are, you know, like her body slashes through the air. Her arms move like wings. She pivots on her left foot and lands on her right foot. She folds over and moves her upper half to the rhythm of the music and exits stage left. You know, you're getting these very precise descriptions of what's happening visually, where I don't think that would have been so carefully thought about if I wasn't a part of the process with the audio describer.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think that makes such a key difference there, because I think most people be like, she dances, or she lifts her left foot, or she bends over, but words like slashes through the air and arms like birds are part of the creative element. And I think that's something that maybe gets lost in that. So I appreciate kind of that distinction that you drew there. And so because we're talking about audio description a little bit. So one of the other things, obviously, audio description, we also hear about captioning, and we talk about accessible screenings and events and the media itself. And so I'm actually going to pivot over to Jade, who I know has some very strong feelings about that kind of access. And I'd love to get just a little bit on what she thinks are some of the big things that maybe are unaddressed and the things that get her most fired up.
Do you mind repeating your question right now? Because I'm having a little bit of technical issues, and now I can see the interpreter on big screen. Do you mind repeating that? Because I looked at my iPhone, and now I can see the interpreter on the big screen. Just go ahead and repeat your question if you wouldn't mind.
All good. Yeah. So Rodney had talked a little bit about audio description and about its importance and how the creator's control of that makes a difference. And we've been exploring the idea of the importance of accessible screenings and events, as well as the accessibility of media itself. And I just commented that you have always had plenty to say on that front. And I just wanted to get a bit from you on what you think are the like maybe hardest hitting things that folks aren't doing, or folks need to do, and ways that you think it could be done better, actually.
Okay, so thank you for asking me that. And I just wanted to say that in my experience with captioning and video specifically, I always include captions in all of my work. And that includes audio description, descriptions of music, and we'll put that in parentheses if we're describing a specific sound, like a door opening or closing, we'll describe that in that way. And whatever type of music it might be. For example, if it was a joyful music or despondent music or something that was more energetic or something that was happening, we would put that type of description in within the captions. So those people who are watching could read it and see what is being described. So within my captions, I always make sure that I add audio descriptions for people as well. And I have to do a little bit better with that. And at film festivals, I realized that there's not a lot of film creators who take the responsibility to add captions on the films that they make. And again, I feel excluded in those venues. Some foreign films do add English captions, yes. Other language captions, that is what I've seen, but really captions are not universally accessible, and it's exhausting to fight. And I know really people don't add captions, and I have to hire people for myself to listen to the audio, get somebody, pay them whatever funds that I have to add captions to make my movies accessible. So I don't know why people don't do the same. I take the extra step to do that, but other people won't do that for deaf people, people with hearing loss, people who are from another country, for example. Captions are necessary in all of these reasons. So we need to be able to read it, whether it's a visual description or an audio description. We want all of the filmmakers to have that responsibility on them. So they're just not accessible.
What do you think is the biggest obstacle on those fronts, like on the filmmaker front, from other filmmakers that maybe you've talked to and work with, and maybe on, let's say, on the festival and event front for them not requiring it or asking for it? Just what's been your experience?
So I honestly think that it's not a question of what challenges that they might come. I feel like they're just lazy. They don't want to do it. They don't want to include that extra work, the extra step to make their films accessible for us. We become an afterthought at that point. We're brushed under the rug, brushed aside. And if we ask them, they're like, well, I don't know, I can't. And it becomes a workaround, and I have to ask somebody else to go talk to somebody else, and I have to talk to the festival runner and the film creator. But really, there should be captions in the first place. The filmmaker's responsibility is to add captions. And it doesn't really cost a lot of money, so people try to use the excuse of funding, but you can use programs or whatever to automatic caption and then edit from there. Really, you're just having somebody listen and type. You can use Final Cut Pro. You don't need somebody who is a specialist to do that job. So there's really no excuse, in my opinion. I mean, if I can do it for all my films, then there should be no excuse for everybody else to do it. There is no barrier for them. I think it's just laziness. I think that's what it is.
Awesome. Thank
I guess
you.
I would just add also that it's been my experience in the US that even if you do go out of your way to have captions and audio descriptions on the film festival circuit, a lot of times the festivals don't actually publicize the fact that you do have audio description and captioning. And even though they might actually have the technology where a blind or low vision person could go up to the box office and ask for the headset and access the audio description file. A lot of times the festival is just not putting that on the list of deliverables that the filmmaker should be delivering. And I think that's a really easy thing to do, to say like, hey, we're an all accessible film festival and we're actually requiring this of you filmmakers. So you can't be lazy about it. This is a community that is diverse in all capacities. And we are mandating that you actually have audio description and captioning as part of your film. And I think Sundance is the only film festival that has asked filmmakers with disabilities what they would like changed about the film festival. And because they asked in 2020, all of the venues had audio description and captioning available. So hopefully other film festivals in the US will follow that lead. But I do think, the festivals can ask you for that asset as a deliverable, and then you have to create it as part of your process. So you can't be lazy or the film festival just won't play your work, right?
Yeah, and I think that makes a great point, right? Because we talk about the creators, but we talk about where the power lies, right? The power lies with some of the festivals and the funders. And if they basically said, hey, we love your film, we want it in our festival, but as part of the package you submit to us, it must have captioning and audio description, people would probably do it. And then because the festivals and the funders do have the power to make those kinds of requirements. And I think that's a great point. I'm going to switch over because I know Reed's been super patient. And I actually know that you've actually been to a lot of events. So I'm actually kind of curious to hear from you about the idea of accessibility as it relates to screenings and events, as well as the media itself, and what your experiences have been.
Sure. I mean, the access I am talking about is a little bit different. It's not about the actual film. It's about the actual venue. A lot of venues are just not wheelchair accessible. They might be ADA compliant. They might have a couple of spaces for wheelchairs, but it's not accessible. I'm in the Bay Area, home of the birth of the disability rights movement, and I shudder every time I have to go to the Roxy in San Francisco, the most popular independent theater in the Valley, has 2 or 3 little wheelchair spots. I can tell you about the arguments at the end when I ask the person sitting next to the wheelchair spot to move so that my friend can sit with me. I live in Oakland. There's a theater called the Critic Theater. They have the biggest theater at the second floor with no elevator. So it's not only about making sure that wheelchairs can get into the theater. It's also about being able to sit with whoever you want, whether they are wheelchair users, whether they are not wheelchair users. The other thing about the Roxy is it's tiny and it's really hard to navigate there. So I mean, especially with these smaller um, theaters that usually screen independent work, the work that amateurs are doing, it's usually, again, I think Jade used this word, an afterthought.
So you're talking about access here to these smaller theaters. I think when people get in and watch it, what has been your experience going to those kinds of theaters when we talk about physical access as a filmmaker? Do you know, when we talk about access to the stage in the back, I got to ask that, right? The stage, the backstage.
That's really interesting. That's a great point. Um, I am ambulatory, so I can access something that's not accessible. So I have that privilege, but that's not a, a lot of people that's not accessible to everyone. And there are stages that have no ramps, and it's just difficult. It makes me cringe to think about possibly doing a Q&A right in front of the stage instead of off the stage. It reminds me of that infamous photo that came out a couple of years ago of the classroom picture where everyone is posing for the school picture, and this boy who uses a wheelchair is kind of 5 feet from everybody else. I mean, it's not professional, it's unbecoming. You're not, you don't have the ability to engage the audience as everyone else does.
Absolutely. I think that being able to engage with folks is such a big part of filmmaking, right?
And it's why we go to film festivals, and so we can do those Q&As and learn from the filmmaker who made this film.
Yeah, and I actually think that's an interesting point that I've actually heard from other folks with regard to, like, right, because you want to connect with the filmmaker. And that one of the other issues that pops up is a lot of times, one, when folks are talking about accessibility, they're talking about it focused on the audience, and they're not necessarily talking about the way the filmmakers work and filmmaker activities. So going to a festival or a conference, there's the formal presentations, right? A panel like this, but then there's the informal time afterwards where you want to go up and chat to the other filmmaker or to the panelist. And
Yeah.
the problem is the captions end and the ASL interpreter is only there for the panel. And so when it comes time for the networking, does that then become an accessibility issue in and of itself? And I know Jade has a lot to say on that, so that's why I'm steering towards that. And then I'm going to circle back to you guys because I know.
Can I do one quick note?
Do it. Do it.
If you have a bar, make sure you have straws. That's the fourth thing I want to emphasize. If you have a bar, make sure you have straws.
Yeah, because the filmmakers will hang out at the bar.
Yes.
That is where we are at. So Jade, like I said, I know you have comments on the idea of that that networking and that more casual interaction that is often not accessibility provided for.
Yes, I mean, so often, so many times I have to, request an ASL interpreter just for, the panel discussion, or to just simply for the film screening. I do have to, have them turn on the captions for that. And a lot of times movies don't even have the captions. So then I request for an interpreter. And oftentimes I need them to stay over they have to be scheduled way ahead of time, because interpreters have their schedules already preset, and you have to do that way in advance. And sometimes there's quite a bit of prep time involved in that. And sometimes, for networking events and things of that nature, after the formal events, I have to actually fight. I have to stand up for myself and say, networking is an important part of the process. It's not just me watching a panel or seeing a film being screened. I want to socialize. I want to get to know the filmmakers, the producers. I want to know the directors. I want to know who the investors are. And sometimes, you have an interpreter who, is willing to put in that extra time, but because it is part of the event, it's all part of the total package from start to finish. So a lot of time, like for example, not too long ago, I was involved in a big film festival. I did go to Sundance Film Festival, and this is the sign I use for the Sundance Film Festival. They did provide ASL interpreters for that event, but keep in mind, it was only in limited fashion. So what I ended up having to do is raise funds on my own via a GoFundMe. So I had to do crowdfunding to pay for my own personal ASL interpreter to accompany me. And yes, I did request for Sundance to be willing to pay, to at least pay in part for the 2 ASL interpreters who accompanied me. And they said, it was something like, it wasn't their area, or, it wasn't their type. It was against their policies. They weren't being in compliance with the Sundance partners and the Utah state, some regulations that they have. So I ended up having to do crowdfunding, I think $15,000, 14 or 15,000, to bring out my ASL interpreters, to fly them in, to pay for their hotel room, to pay the fees that they incurred, attending the events, etc. So I had to make sure that I had access 24/7, round the clock. And, from the time I woke up in the morning, we would get together, we would go out together, we would go to different events together. We were side by side. And so those interpreters, they had to have a break. So there has to be 2 of them for them to switch back and forth. And so for the next festival, I would be happy to go back to Sundance next year for 2021. But I don't know what's going to happen with that due to coronavirus. However, my plan is to bring 4 interpreters for this next upcoming event, because we're still working on, if Sundance is able to pay for part of them for personal interpreters, that's still an issue that we're working on, because the state of Utah is extremely white. There are very few people of color there at all. Black interpreters are next to none in the state of Utah. And you can see by my shirt, #BlackDeafTalent. That's one of our main goals, is to really advocate for people of color, and specifically for Black ASL interpreters. Because there are plenty of white interpreters everywhere else. And it's not that, there's a negative against white interpreters. But they have their area, they have their worth and their job, and that's not, we've had their turn already with many white interpreters. So now we really want to spotlight and focus and give representation and support and opportunities to Black interpreters as well. So that's where we're headed.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, I know at the more recent IDA Getting Real conference, as well as providing captioning for their panels in some ASL, they actually provided, I think it was 2 hours worth of ASL interpreting for any kind of networking events that people wanted to do in addition. 2 hours isn't a lot, but at least we know, at least some conferences are recognizing the importance of that, those casual kinds of conversations and interactions, because filmmaking is still very much built on the who you know and how you work with folks, which actually brings me to my next thing, which is about some of the building a team to kind of help make that kind of film and build that kind of experience and what that means. And I'm going to circle back to Rodney, because you've done a couple of film stuff and you've done some interesting stuff with building your own team, and also kind of like, how does when we talk about disability and the way people move in and out of community, and also the way people choose to be more vocal or less vocal about it, also makes it a big deal. And I know you've had some experience and actually have some really interesting thoughts about that, which I thought were amazing. And I'd love to have you share that.
Yeah, I mean, I guess there's a lot to say and under the scope of that question. Is there anything specific that you're thinking of in terms of like identities or areas that you want?
Yeah, I think part of it is identities, because I've heard you talk about that before in the conversation we had before, and I loved what you had to say on that front.
I mean, I guess I'll just say that, like, as a Black gay filmmaker with a disability, with a certain body of work that has, been really embraced by the LGBTQ plus community, right? And that I'm really proud of, that community has taken that work to heart, and that it's meant a lot to certain films that I've done, like Brother to Brother. I feel like allowed people to see themselves in a nuanced, multidimensional way on screen that they've never seen before. And that's really important for me to hear. And I think that the same thing happened with vision portraits, to be honest. Like, a lot of blind and low vision people would just come up to me and say, I have never seen my experience on screen like that before, or that film reflects who I am, or just came up to me and hugged me and cried for 4 minutes because the connection was so deep, and their ability to see themselves reflected back at them was so powerful that they couldn't put it into words, and they didn't need to. But I will say that, that a lot of times filmmakers with disabilities get underestimated, right? And we basically are not at the top of the list of the calls to make the mainstream Tiger Woods documentary for HBO, right? Like, I mean, if you really want to get into it, it's like, those are cis, white, het male directors that are always getting the opportunities. And even in this time of racial reckoning and global uprisings and people examining their systemic infrastructure problems and all of the inequities within their institutions, for that to happen is astonishing. You know what I mean? And for the fix to be, okay, we're gonna try to establish mentoring programs for filmmakers of color. And a lot of us are like, excuse me, we have been making films for over 20 years. Like, we are mid-career. Like, we don't need to be mentored. We would love to be at the top of the list when you start thinking about making films about people of color, or queer people of color, or disabled people that are reflective of our communities, that you think about us, who have that insider knowledge about those experiences, who will frankly make a better film. Like, why are we not on your lists, right? And like, where are you going to find your talent? And maybe you need to reassess what that list is and how you compose that list, and think about diversity and inclusion when making that list?
Yes. Now you know why I saved that question for Rodney going, yes, tell me this. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I really like the point about insider knowledge, right? When we talk about filmmaking, and let's be honest, disability as a subject of documentary filmmaking, and actually even in scripted filmmaking, has been real popular, especially amongst non-disabled filmmakers. Why? Because it's this easy, heartfelt, overcoming kinds of stories. But I like what you talked about, authenticity and insider knowledge. And I'm going to poke at Reed, because I think Reed's been lovely and quiet for a little too long here, about what do we gain by having that insider knowledge. It's kind of one of those things where, because right now there's that reach of saying, let's bring more diverse filmmakers in. I'm like, so tell me all the things we have to offer. I want to hear what's gained and what's lost, especially when it comes to disability, because I think, everyone, not everyone, but I think there's been a belief that, well, yeah, I'm a filmmaker, I'm just documenting a community. I don't have to have somebody with a disability on my film or on my crew. And everybody here is going to have a fit at that, but or be really upset. But yeah, so I just want to hear a little bit on kind of like, what do we bring Tell me, tell everybody here.
I would like to kind of flip that question on its head a little bit. In a society where one's disability dictates so much, how can a non-disabled filmmaker make an accurate portrayal of a disability topic or a character with a disability, or a protagonist with a disability? As a filmmaker, my top priority is to foster connections with other people through my work. And I just doubt that a non-disabled filmmaker can do that authentically via a film that tackles disability. Some of the worst documentaries I've seen about disability, and of course I'm biased, but to the point where they are closer, it would be better to not have these documentaries than to have them. It does a tremendous about image, whether you're talking about perpetuating tropes or perpetuating actual social stigmas that ultimately tangibly hurt disabled people in real life. So if you really care about the advancement of disabled people, and really recognize it as a marginalized minority, then step back and let us tell these stories.
Yes. I don't know if you guys have anything to add to that.
I would just say I absolutely agree. And I think that there is so much fear and shame and stigma and just negative suicidality around disability in particular, and people not wanting to disclose for fear of loss of employment. I can't tell you how many people have emailed me after Vision Portraits came out and said, like, you know, I've never told anyone, but I don't have vision in my left eye, and I'm a graphic designer, and I feel like if I told anyone, like, I've always had this shame about it. I'm in my 40s and I still haven't told anyone about it. And thank you for being so brave to actually acknowledge that you have this disability and to put yourself on a 50-foot screen, you know, and to talk about it, you know what I mean? So I feel like the inaccurate depictions and the compounding of fear and shame and the kind of inspiration porn, like, you know, the like, I'm cured, and like that's everyone's like aim, you know what I mean? Like that does a huge disservice to the disability community. So I'm completely in agreement with what Reed is saying, and just like, it's like, if that's what you're doing, then that's not helping us. That's actually like re-stigmatizing and making the issue worse. And so like, just don't do it. Like, let us do it, because we actually understand the experience from the inside. We're going to have the trust and the intimacy from the disabled community that are going to be, you know, the participants in front of the camera, right? And so there's already a shared experience that we have where they are already more open with us, because they don't have to explain their experiences to us, because we know what their experiences are.
Absolutely. And I know Jade's about to jump in here.
Yeah.
Yes, I was about to jump in. The interpreter's good? Yeah. Okay, perfect. So I just wanted to add that since I've been developing a TV series right now, and we're in talks with it, it's a comedy series, so it's a comedy drama, and I have a co-writer, a co-creator who is white and hearing, and they really don't have the experience or the knowledge about Black Deaf culture specifically. Plus, their background really is, the concept is loosely based on real life, right? That's how TV series work sometimes. And for me to collaborate with that person, I have to give them a lot more resources when we're talking about collaboration. I have to give them links, articles, give them so much statistics about the Black Deaf community. I'm giving all the time to this collaborator. And I feel like, you know, sometimes if somebody's writing about something and they're in that process, it becomes a little bit ableist because they are a hearing person. And it becomes racist because they're white. And so I have to suggest a lot of changes to this person, to use other words, give them different options, give them different language to use, all of these resources that I was talking about. And it's my series and they're collaborating with me, but again, they're telling my story in a different way. It might feel good enough for them, and people know them and they seem qualified, but they're not really. And we are kind of partnering together, but with my experience and their experience, we're qualified equally. And it's been 25 years that I've had to work at this to be able to get in this venue, but Black Deaf people want to see ourselves on the screen telling our stories. We want to see that representation and have it represented honestly, truthfully. And we have to make spaces for us that are respectful. And it's still a big process, obviously, but my role as a creative director does overlap because I'm becoming an educator to this person. I don't like that experience. It's exhausting. It's really labor intensive to explain to my collaborator in ways that we have to truthfully represent the community that we're trying to represent. And I've collaborated with other showrunners, but again, my position becomes more than it should be. It's misunderstood. And really, I do have a lot of experience in filmmaking and film festivals, award shows, and all of that. And again, I've been working at this for 25 years. So I want to make sure that our voice and our stories are being told and represented accurately. And I'm not quiet about it. I'm not. And I'm not going to be quiet about it.
Awesome. I think one of the things that you said really struck me, and I think it's something that all kind of filmmakers with disabilities get caught up into, whether we like it or not. We want to focus on being filmmakers and about our project and our work, and unfortunately, it is a collaborative medium. You end up working with people, whether we like it or not. We end up having to be educators and almost ambassadors relating to our disability, into the disability community, because that knowledge isn't there on the other side. And to be able to be successful as a filmmaker, we still have to end up educating. So we're doing two jobs at once. And I think that's just an ongoing struggle that folks have. And I think I'm kind of summarizing what you're saying, because my next was like, well, what do you guys think? I'm like, you guys just said that. So I'm going to actually take us on one other slightly little jaunt. We were talking about captioning and audio description. So we're talking about access at the end and access at the theater. And then we talked a little bit about some of the festivals and events and the accessibility there, and a little bit about what it is working with people, right? So I want to just kind of go back and lay that out with regard to, let's say, the stages of filmmaking, and talk about how do you ensure accessibility and disability, like at all stages, like when someone's just getting started, right? Whether that's a filmmaker with a disability or somebody without a disability who wants to make a film about disability, you're in that development stage and production all the way through from beginning to end, and just kind of like, what would be your recommendations to kind of build that kind of inclusivity? Because I think we've all said over and over, you've got to do it all the way. You can't just throw it in at the end. So I'd love to hear from you guys what you think at each of these stages, what needs to be done. And I don't know who would like to volunteer to be first. I will pick on you.
I can go if no one wants to jump in, because I do feel like, I mean, I've had some experiences, collaborating, and and working with, one of the participants in Vision Portraits is a writer who wrote a memoir called Cockeyed. And he's also in the writer's room on a network show, a show on the CW, and that show has a blind lead protagonist, right? And so they're again looking to Ryan for the knowledge of the blind person's perspective, but they're not casting a blind actress, right? Number one, in that part. So they're not giving that that world of blind actresses the shot at the role that they could embody best, right? That's going to a sighted actress. And so I think it becomes like, who's part of the team, and how does that reflect in the verisimilitude of the story, right? Does this feel like bullshit? Does she look blind? Does she look the way that, you know what I mean? There's just like, things don't track. And so like, I'm gonna call BS on some of this, and like, and ask like, why is that not going to a blind actress when there's so many, gifted blind actors and actresses who could better serve that role, right? And so, and then in terms of crew, like, if you're doing a disabled story, like, can you have a disability members of the crew also participate in key roles, right? If it's a fiction film, or can there be some sort of mentorship program that if they're not actually, trained as a DP, or that you're constantly thinking about how to build that community and how to lift them up to the next level, so that they can sort of move up in their career, and how can the entire process kind of facilitate that? I mean, I think that that's a huge thing. And then also just in the editorial process, showing it to blind and low vision members, community members, and getting feedback from them, and allowing that to be absorbed into the editorial process. And and then I have already talked about the idea of audio description and how that opens up this whole blind and low vision community that just never thinks there are stories about them. So again, that's like another level of having to partnership with nonprofits, places like the Foundation for Fighting Blindness. I'm trying to think of some of the real national organizations in the National Federation for the Blind. Just like, how do you get the word out to an audience that is not used to seeing themselves on screen? So why would they ever show up at the theater if they're not there? You know what I mean? So it's like, this is for you. like it's here. Like, so just using networks and platforms to also spread the word. So you're right. It's at every step of the process, from development, as Jade was saying, having the disabled person be the authentic voice, telling the story. Like, what are we talking about? Like, whose experience are we reflecting? And is that a truthful, kind of multidimensional, nuanced portrayal that's on the page? And then how does that get translated to the screen?
Mm-hmm. Awesome.
I want to go back a little bit to trying to make human connections. And I think Dave, your question kind of encapsulates production, and how can production be accessible. And what I've been trying to experiment with lately is trying to embody my own physicality in my work. So if I move a lot, I'm going to shoot videos that will flex that. Why would I filter it through a tripod or another person shooting when I can be shooting it and I can use my own literal physical experience in my work? My other thought, and I think people would be a little overwhelmed by the thought of having a disabled person as a production team and say, well, why would we do that? And what I've learned from the disability movement, from Judy Heumann especially, is asking why not? How can we make it work? Why wouldn't it work? Why are we not including these people in production if they are truly part of the fabric of humanity?
like that. Why not? All right. Jade?
Okay, so can you repeat again to me what the original question was?
You know, all my questions are super long and complicated, and I talk all the way around it.
Yeah, just give me a quick summary of what you were saying, just real quick.
Yeah. Honestly, I actually wanted, it's a summation kind of what you guys have been saying all along. And I was just asking for y'all's recommendations and ideas across the spectrum of filmmaking, from development, you know, what are the ideas for access inclusion there, the access and inclusion in production, all the way to the end. Because we talked a little bit about that previously, but I'd love to hear it from you guys from beginning to end.
Okay, got it. That's what I thought. Just wanted to make sure before I started speaking. So as for right now, the process, like I said, I'm in the process of developing a TV series, and I do not have an agency representing me. But what I do have is an attorney who represents me. So as a writer, creator, when I end up receiving the shopping agreement contract that I received from the TV executives, I received that back in February. So I took a look at it, read it over, and in the contract, I had to be sure, of course, that my attorney was included in that. There is a clause that is included where their executive from the TV show, the studios, they were included in that. And there's a specific line in their budget that says for accessibility, specifically for ASL interpreters, specifically for note takers. If we need to use VRS services, whatever corporation that would be used in that room, any type of setup, using Zoom, using specific interpreters. There's a line budget from development through to production, through to post-production. And, you know, any type of interviews or media that would be done after that, red carpet interviews, etc. That's included. That is included right in the contract, point blank.
Wow.
So my interpreters, of course, like I said previously, they have a lot of hours. We do a lot of video conferencing. And there has been a situation where they were overlooked. So my interpreter would contact me and say, you know, who am I supposed to be submitting my invoice to after I complete my service? So I said, that goes directly to the executive. The executive then sent it to me, pointing the fingers my way. So I was able to pull that contract back out, locate that line item, and, you know, let them know this is what it is. We had a meeting and I said, it's right here in the contract. So my attorney, my interpreter, everyone was able to be on the same page to know that it's not, you can't get away with just being like, oh, it's not my responsibility, it's not my job, send it out. And it can become a sticky situation if it's not stated so blatantly. Because I do have a partnership, a collaboration with an executive, and I'm not officially like employed, so to speak. I'm hired, I'm working, we've been greenlit. But that type of situation, you know, I'm going through right now where they're saying, you know, oh, you have to pay for this, that, and the other. And as a creative showrunner, I am a professional, and there is a character in my show who is a Black deaf person. So we're trying to build the story, build the characters based on this character, who this person is, but yet everyone wants to be very hands off about it. And it's like, no, look at what's written in here in black and white. So I posted that I was looking for an ADA accessibility coordinator, and oftentimes you'll have the interpreter who kind of takes on the role of consultant. They'll kind of have a dual role where it overlaps. They're interpreting what's going on, they're advising at the same time. They're letting me know what's going on, what's happening, whether it's on Zoom, wherever it is we might be. So they're put in several different roles, so I have to have, like, for example, today, there was an issue with my Zoom. Sometimes the captions overlay the person's face as they're speaking. You have to set up different technology. So you have a computer here and an iPhone there at the same time. So in the deaf world, accessibility is something altogether different. And you have to be careful, to pay the interpreters all their hours, because they're spending quite a few hours, and this is a really new experience for me. I don't have any other, there are 2 deaf white showrunners, and then there's me. So I'm the first. Let me say this again. So wait, I made a mistake. I said something. I don't want to say too much, but this show is loosely based on my life as a Jamaican Black deaf woman. And I am deaf the first deaf Black showrunner. And it's amazing to me that a lot of times this journey, the things that I've gone through, I've kind of figured my way through, and there's been no one before me that I can look back to and say, hey, how did you navigate this? What happened here? I've had to go through the hard knocks on my own and figure my own way out. And so that takes a lot of responsibility. So I can't just be creative. I can't just write, because I have all these other things to deal with as well. And frankly, it's exhausting.
I believe it. I think that's been true for even just many women of color. They end up having to become entrepreneurs as well as just working on the film, because it's the only way to do it. I know we're headed towards the Q&A, but I wanted to take 1 minute here or a minute or two, because I think we did it a little bit. A lot of these kinds of panels, especially when it deals with disability and accessibility, we have amazing filmmakers with disabilities, and we end up talking about access and inclusion. But the thing is, you guys are filmmakers first. You guys are creatives first. So I wanted to give each of you guys just 2 minutes to talk about what is, either your most recent project that you want to promote, or what you're working on now, so we get to see you as a creative, right? As that filmmaker. I'm going to poke at Reed first, because right now he's the closest on my screen. So tell us about, if you can, what you're working on now, or your most recent piece.
I am working on a feature right now. I'm about 18 months into working on it. It's called I Didn't See You There. It's about a circus tent that goes up outside my apartment in Oakland. I recently pitched the film at Point North Institute, and that will be aired tomorrow with there were 6 films, and one of the other filmmakers, Allison O'Daniel, who is also on this call, is identified as hard of hearing, has pitched a wonderful film, The Tuba Thieves. So it's really nice to kind of make this round of forms with Allison. We also, together with IF Pee-wee, and we're able to have some great conversations with funders and distributors.
Fantastic. Rodney, how about you?
So I am still touring a lot with Vision Portraits, which chronicles the experiences of blind and low vision artists. There's a photographer named John Dugdale, an African-American dancer named Kayla Hamilton, a writer slash TV writer slash monologuist named Ryan Knighton, and myself as a low vision filmmaker. And so I kind of chronicle my my own process in making the film and some of the difficulties that I've had over the years in making work, frankly. And so, so yeah, I'm visiting a lot of colleges and universities via Zoom with that film, and it's been really great. Just opening up that conversation about disability to university students and having them ask questions. And then I'm also in development on a feature-length historical fiction film about Billy Strayhorn, who is an openly gay jazz composer who composed a lot of great music and didn't get a lot of the credit that he should have gotten, and lived largely under the shadows of Duke Ellington. So, you know, I am hoping that that will happen sometime in the next year, COVID willing, but you know, I'm putting everyone's safety first and don't want anyone to get sick, you know, because of my filmmaking practice. And so whenever I feel like it's safe for a low budget film to go back into production without doubling their budget due to safety COVID protocols, which we can't afford to do, right? So I'm gonna have to sort of wait and see when that makes financial sense. But that's the thing that's on the front burner right now, cooking.
Awesome. Yeah, and I think we got a hint from you, Jade. So just a real quick 2 minutes on what do you have cooking that you'd love to share?
As far as my work goes, is that what you're meaning?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is the chance to talk as a creative.
Okay. So like I said, I'm developing my show. And in addition to that, I do have other content, other films. There's one called The Shattered Mind. And again, loosely based on my life. And it's a full-length feature film. We are touring the film at different film festivals. We toured 2015 to 2017, different film festivals. And so I wasn't able to attend all 7 of the festivals, but the film did, all over the world. And we actually won 17 awards. So my movie is currently available online on the website, which is www.jadefilm.com. So again, that's jadefilm.com. And I have about 14 films already completed. And there are 6 TV shows that I kind of have a concept of, or we're developing currently. And I do have a documentary about Black deaf in America and our lives. And, you know, as it relates to the Black Lives Matter experience, our experience, you know, with racism in America, discrimination, it just covers quite a few bases. So we're working on that right now. So I'm focusing on the TV show right now. We're having meetings, we're in the process of writing. And so I'm really focusing on that currently.
Fantastic. Thanks, you guys. Right now, I figure we're going to be transitioning over to the Q&A section. And I know Grishma is going to be there. And if you have questions, folks who are listening and watching, please feel free to drop those into the Zoom Q&A for our fabulous panelists.
Hello. Yes, this is the voice of the host. We've got some sexy audience questions that need answers.
Sexy.
Our first question comes from Yvette, who asks, as a creator, are there programs available to create captions? Do you use them? If so, which ones do you prefer to use? And which is the most accurate? Who wants to take that question on?
I'll let Jade take that.
For captions for films, that's what the question is asking, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I use Final Cut Pro for me. That's what works for me, and that's what I've been using for all my videos. Yeah, for all my films. And I still use Final Cut Pro 7.0, and that's the version that I use because it has all of the professional features within that, and it works well with my computer. I don't like the newest updated version. They've taken a lot of the features that I use, so I use Mac specifically, and I use that on my system. I've upgraded my computer, but I leave that program and I kind of don't let it update. So that's just the best program that I use for me. And I have about 5 computers, but Final Cut Pro without the update, Final Cut Pro 7.0 works the best for me. Yeah, there's so many machines in this house now, but that's what I use. So yeah, I think I use that for my technology for captions.
Okay, we also have a question from Julie, who wants to know whether captioning is required by the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act.
I will say it is, actually. There was an addendum passed in January of 2019, and I had to refer to this addendum on my theatrical release, where anything that was showing theatrically, digitally in a movie theater had to have captions and audio description provided. And so there were a lot of smaller indie houses that weren't adhering to those protocols. And I had to be like, look, you're actually breaking the law. So anybody could walk in here and sue you. And so I'm doing you a solid by like getting you up to the standards that the law is dictating by asking you to install this audio description headset technology in your theaters. And I, there was some pushback from different theaters, and it took me threatening to pay for it myself out of pocket, where my team that I put together for distribution were like, did I just see an email where Rodney is paying for your theater to upgrade to the ADA stand? I don't think I saw that right. And they were like, of course we're gonna cover it. Of course. You know what I mean? So on the one hand, there are places, that should be covering it. And it was literally $1,500 to upgrade to have the audio description and the headsets. And there were other places that just couldn't afford to show on DCP. They were showing on Blu-ray. So what I would do is I would have open audio description and open captions for like if I was doing a Q&A, I would have one room with open description, open captioning, and then one room without, and then we would all merge together at the end. And then every screening that had open audio description and open captioning would be listed in all of the newspapers and advertising. So people, from the blind and low vision community and the hard of hearing community would know that those were the screenings that were fully accessible. So, on the one hand, you have to kind of work with nonprofits because DCP technology sometimes is like $75,000, right? And if they spend that, they'll go under, right? And so we want these small nonprofit independent theaters to survive, but we also want them to be showing the film in as accessible a form as possible. So a lot of times it's hammering out the details of what makes the most sense. So that's been my experience, but it is a requirement.
Yeah, no, that actually is a perfect segue to this next question. Clark asks, As a disabled filmmaker, I've had the experience of festivals accepting my work, only to find out that after, the event won't be accessible. On one hand, it feels like the right thing to do to insist on only having our work seen at accessible outlets. At the same time, how effective can boycotting be when audiences who never see deaf and disabled film anyways aren't aware that they're missing anything? How do you navigate that balance? And how would you recommend other filmmakers handle that?
Ooh, you don't ask easy questions, do you?
Thank you all. Nice to hear from you. I think it's a personal choice. I have never personally had to deal with that, and I don't feel comfortable speculating or lecturing you on what you should do. But as you said, it's a very tough balancing act between trying to get exposure as a disabled filmmaker in a field where disabled makers are underrepresented in um in being in solidarity with trying to promote access. So I think each individual filmmaker has to navigate that on their own.
You know, I guess I would say hopefully with Sundance at the forefront, making those accessibility requirements mandatory and having their theaters fully accessible, that will start to become the standard. I mean, that's my hope, right? But I've had experiences where and I felt like the onus was on me to actually tell the festival director to say, hey, I showed my film at the festival. A young African-American blind, like 8-year-old girl came up to me and said, I really liked your film. I would have loved it if there was audio description. And I was like, I do have a version with audio description. The festival just never asked me for it. And she was like, oh, I come to this theater and they do have the headset system. So it literally was like the festival just not asking for the asset, right? And so I had to take it upon myself to be like, hey, this happened. I just want you to know for future reference, it might be a good idea to have this on a list of deliverables because you are showing in theaters that do have audio description capability. And then like, I don't run that festival, right? So like, I can't dictate policy. I can only share my experience of how shitty that felt for me as a filmmaker, and to say that I had to email the audio described version to the father of this 8-year-old child and say, like, here you are, here's the version that that gives you a fuller experience. And I'm sorry that that you weren't able to have that experience in the theater the first time. You know, and I think the more that people are open about those experiences, the more that festivals are apt to change, you know.
And this is Day. I'm gonna pop in for a minute, and it'd be awful and say that, from one of the things that I did, particularly with some of the smaller festivals, if they didn't ask for a DCSP for captioning and audio description because they couldn't play it, I actually would just send them the copy with the captions burned in where you couldn't turn it off and where the audio description is already in there. So they would have to play it with open captions and with the audio description on. And I'll be honest, not one has ever sent it back and said, we won't do it. So that's a little more bold, but that worked. And open caption is not required by law, except in Hawaii, where they actually passed a state law that that said that some of his screenings had to be open captioned. So kind of pushing the festivals by just giving them that copy is what I did, because I was comfortable doing that.
So it's closed captioning that's required. Is that correct?
Yeah, closed captioning is what's required. Opening captioning isn't required,
Okay.
except in Hawaii.
Okay, interesting.
Okay, and that's all the time we have today for Q&A. So it's time for me to say the remarks and the closing.
I just wanted to add one really quick thing and just say that in other countries where there is more funding for the arts, they are actually able to stipulate that these types of accessibility requirements are reinforced because they control the purse strings, right? So it's like, if you don't have this stuff in place, you're actually not getting funding, where there's such a kind of negligible amount of government funding for the arts in the US that we're not capable of doing that. But that is why, you know, places like Toronto and Sydney have this stuff in place. And when you play a festival in those countries, they automatically ask you for that, because they have to adhere to the rules that they have signed contracts on that allow them to actually receive funding. So it's also about like the value of culture and filmmaking that that the U.S. places and the amount of resources that that we have, and you know what is required for those resources. So I think it's sad that that we don't have those kind of government resources that force people to comply to the ADA requirements. Just needed to say that.
No, absolutely.
Just from a global perspective, like the US is way behind a lot of other countries, and it's sad.
So I will leave one question for everyone to think about, which is a question that Lawrence asked. What's one thing that folks who aren't filmmakers, meaning activists, audiences, and allies, what they can do to move the needle forward? So while you all are thinking about that, I'd love to close with a few words. Obviously, it comes as no surprise. This was a wonderful conversation. Thank you so much to our moderator, Day, and our panelists, Reed, Rodney, and Jade. We appreciate you joining us to help reframe access in film and media. We're also grateful to have ASL interpreters Rory Burton and Selena Flowers from Pro Bono ASL, and Tina Dillon from Dillon Reporting Service, who provided real-time closed captioning, also called CART. To our attendees, we hope you enjoyed this session and will leave us thinking today about what you can do on an individual level and in your community. Think about your superpower and what you can do to move the needle forward on inclusion. You will be receiving a post survey via email. Please fill it out. This survey will help us assess how these conversations are benefiting our film community. And lastly, you're invited to continue this conversation with us next week, Friday, October 16th, 2020 at 2 p.m. Central Time. Join us for our presenter conversation, where film festivals, exhibitors, distributors will come together in addressing accessibility at the next stage of a film's journey. The wonderful Day Al Mohammed will moderate again with guests Emily Beatix of the Paul K. Longmore Institute on Disability and Superfest Film Festival, as well as Cheryl Green and Brenda Avila-Hanna from New Day Films. And it's 3:30, right on time. And I hope to see you all next week. Thank you very much.
Thank you.